Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I leave my house and deliver an episode to you while I walk to the train. Dun dun dun! Well, good morning, listeners. It is a lovely day here in suburban Chicago, unseasonably warm. It's 50 degrees. I have no hat. I have no gloves. I just have a light jacket to wear. But that's the kind of day it's turned out to be. Lovely. Well, as you could hear from my introduction, I'm taking a little bit different approach this morning. I am delivering the episode to you on my way to the train rather than my way home from the train. I may, in fact, record another episode on the way home, but I thought, I have this time. I didn't have anything particular I needed to think about or whatever. So I thought, hey, I will just record an episode on the way to the train. Isn't that interesting? So this episode continues the catch up from the Thanksgiving extravaganza that I experienced, in which we played a whole bunch of games. That's right. It's another episode of Shooting from the Hip Triple Shot. Okay, here we go. So in this episode, I will be talking about 3 games that I tried recently for the first time, all 3 of which I enjoyed quite a bit. Not to give away the ending, but I guess I just did. So the first game is Demon Worker. This is from Shogo Karuta and published in America by Japanime Games. This is a cute little card-based worker placement game in which you play a demon trying to take over the seat of hell. It is very cutesy and very silly. The theme is a bit much, perhaps, especially if you're somebody from a religious background where the idea of joking around about demons isn't appropriate. But I think the game takes it in a light enough way that I think you could enjoy it for the silliness of it in the same way that you can enjoy movies about goofy anti-heroes or whatever. But, I imagine that if you're somebody for whom this is an issue, you wouldn't buy a game called Demon Worker anyway. But in the game, you are one of 4 potential kings of hell, and you're trying to get the most efficient use of your stuff in order to get the most points, evil points, by the end of the game and become the new king of hell. The way the game is played, at the beginning you get 1 king of hell. There is no active distinction between them. And you get 2 human workers, and these are cards, and then on the card there's a little disc. You put just a wooden disc of your player color. On your turn, you activate one of your demon workers one of your workers by paying food cost, and some of the demons also need food to activate, and some of them will use one of the other 3 resources as well. They have sacrifice, which are yellow tokens, weapons, which are blue, and magic, which are red. So you spend some amount of food. The humans each cost 1 to activate, and then you put the disc from that card onto one of the worker spots, which are represented by other cards. In the 2-player game, there are 9 locations. In a 3 or 4-player game, there are 11, and these locations allow you to do a variety of different things. They're pretty simple as far as worker placement actions go. It's collecting resources. It's spending resources to get other resources, spending resources to get points, and recruiting other workers. That's kind of the gist of what you're doing. You can also draw endgame cards. You can draw endgame cards. So the first round is pretty simple. You're just playing the 2 workers that you have, probably putting out another worker, maybe doing a couple other things. And then as you go along, you're accumulating more workers and doing more things. By itself, pretty vanilla, very easy to engage with. The place where this game really shines, it's twofold. First off are the additional workers themselves. The game comes with a big deck of demons who can be your additional workers, and each one has its own special power. Some of them have a universal power that happens wherever you place them. Other ones usually have a much better power, but it only happens if you send them to a certain location. For example, in the game we played, my son early on got a demon worker who got 4 additional food if you send him to the food location, which normally gets you 3 food. So every round he would send that guy there and get 7 food, which was really good. A nice way to keep up the efficiency in order to feed his people. So one thing I didn't mention so far, if you want to send your worker to a place where there's already a worker, You can. You just have to pay 2 extra food on top of whatever you pay to activate your worker. So it gets very expensive very quickly to send your worker to the same place someone else went. There's a couple exceptions. The one main exception to that you have to pay extra food to go there rule is the recruitment space where you go to recruit another demon. That one does not have an additional cost to go there, regardless of how many chips are already there. But so, like I said, there's a whole bunch of these demon workers, and they do all sorts of different things that are what make the game interesting. And your goal is to kind of build an interesting engine of these workers that, as you're using them, will generate more resources and points and head you down the line toward the end of the game. The way you get those workers is at the beginning of the game, everyone gets dealt 6 workers. And then in our first game, we just kept the hand we were dealt because we don't really know what they do. But then after that, we just, you draft. You take a card, pass your hand, take a card, pass your hand, and so on until you have 6 demons. And those are the only ones that you can get. There is no getting another demon card. You get those 6. Those are the 6 you have available to put into play. The only other way you can get additional cards is to take those scoring cards I was talking about, and those are not related to your workers. The worker addition spot that you can go to lets you put a worker into play. Each worker has a deployment cost that is different than their food cost that you have to be able to pay in order to put them into play. And then once you put them into play, you can't use them till the next round because when you put the card down, it doesn't have a token on it. And you put tokens on the card at the end of the round when you scoop things back up. At the end of the game, you get points for a number of different things. First off, you get points that you've earned along the way, which can be a substantial amount. You can get points for your end game bonus cards, which can be substantial. You can earn 6 points, or you can earn 10 points if you manage to get all 6 of your demon workers played. If you manage to get 5 of the 6 played, you would get 5 points, and fewer than 5, you don't get anything. And then each worker itself is also worth some points, but only if you can feed it one more time at the end of the game. So one of the big things you're doing as you go along is you are saving up resources to be able to pay for those endgame scoring cards and to be able to pay for your workers pay your workers' food costs one more time. Because if you're able to do that, you score the points for them. If you can't do that, you don't. So there's an interesting trade-off at the end of the game if you haven't been able to generate enough resources to really hit all the things you have, of deciding which characters you're going to fund at the end. It's a really fun game, interesting mechanisms, interesting interplay between the different workers, and quite a delight to engage with. So, and also the endgame scoring cards are all these tasks that are ridiculously titled and hilarious to think about. Stuff like make all the toilets in the world back up, or whatever. Things demons would do to bother people. So that's Demon Worker from Japanime Games. Definitely worth checking out. I had a good time playing it, and I'm looking forward to playing it again. Next up, we have Fantasy Realms, designed by Bruce Glasgow and published by WizKids. Fantasy Realms is about the most generic themed game I've ever encountered. It's called Fantasy Realms, which is already pretty forgettable. And then all of the art is well done, but pretty forgettable. It's all sort of generic fantasy. It could be called Generic Fantasy, the card game. But don't let that sort of drab cover fool you. The gameplay on this game is really, really good. It's a very interesting game. It's Gin style or Rummy style, where you have a hand of cards, and on your turn you're going to draw a card and play a card. And the game goes until there are 10 cards in the discard area, because unlike Rummy or other games where discarding a card puts it into a stack, in this game, when you discard a card, you put it into a field, and that card that you discarded, along with all the other ones in the field, are available for people to draw. So as the game goes along and you get more and more cards in the discard field, you have more and more options for what you're going to draw, and the pace of the game slows down, because the game does not end until there are 10 cards in that discard field. Which means that if you get to the point where you think you have about as good a hand as you can get, if there's not 10 cards in the field, then you start drawing from the deck every turn to accelerate the end of the game. Now, each card in the game is one of 6 or 7 suits and has a scoring condition on it. So each card has a base score that it's worth, but then it also has a scoring condition. Some are positive, some are negative, and they interact with the other cards that you have in your hand at the end of the game. So you might have, I had a card that was a special tree, and it was worth 50 points, but only if I also had these 2 other cards. And then those 2 other cards had other things that affected them. And so what you're trying to do is build a combo of cards that will get you the most points at the end of the game. It's really interesting, very easy to play, difficult to score. It takes as long to score as to play almost. I did find there was an app that I heard about, which you can take a picture of your array of cards, and then it will identify them, and you pick from the list which cards you had, and then it scores them for you. I'm not sure we'll want to do that, actually. It's kind of fun to go through the scores. Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot more to say about it, except that it's really good. And if you get a chance to try it, I definitely recommend. I think it does suffer from luck of the draw quite a bit, in the same way that Rummy would. And I would imagine if you're going to make some sort of tournament or something, you would have to do, best score over 5 hands, that kind of thing. Because otherwise, really just, you could just have a lucky hand and do incredibly well. And so I think over time, probably the skilled players will navigate the market of cards better than unskilled players. But I think on any given hand, luck is a huge part of it, as is often the case with card-based games. Like I said, the theme is nothing to write home about. In fact, this is a game I've wanted to check out for a while. The thing that drove me to get it was, 1, available on Amazon, so I got it for free with Amazon points. 2, somebody on Board Game Geek published their own print and play version of this game themed around the comic book The Watchmen. So they took every card in the game, translated it into one of the Watchmen cards, and did it that way. And I'm really excited to try that. So now that I've bought Fantasy Realms, I feel ethically okay with printing out a copy of Watchmen, the Watchmen version, and playing that. So at some point next year, probably, I will try that, and I'm excited to let you know how it goes. In the meantime, definitely give Fantasy Realms a chance if you can. I haven't played there is an expansion, which I probably will get, because the first game was really good. But we'll see whether I can get this back to the table much or not. So that's Fantasy Realms from Bruce Glasgow and WizKids. All right, the third game I want to talk about today is Back to the Future, Back in Time. This is one of the 2 Back to the Future themed games that came out last year, the other one being Back to the Future Dice Through Time. This one was released by Prospero Hall, and generally regarded, I think, as the better of the 2 Back to the Future games that came out last year. I also have Back to the Future, the Adventure card game, or an Adventure Through Time, I think it's called, which is the card game that Matt Riddle and Ben Pinchback designed. I think is really good, and frankly has the best DeLorean of the bunch. It comes with a Hot Wheels DeLorean, whereas the DeLorean that came in the Prospero Hall game is definitely not a Hot Wheels car. It's just a plastic car. Not nearly as good. But the gameplay. So this one is a cooperative game in which you are one of 4 characters. You're either Doc or Marty or Einstein or Marty's girlfriend, whose name I can't recall right now, Jennifer. And you go back into 1955, and your goal is to make sure that Marty's parents fall in love and make sure the DeLorean is repaired and get the DeLorean to the appropriate spot in the road by the end of the game. Meanwhile, Biff is running around the board, messing stuff up. So on our first play, we completely underestimated how significant Biff is in the play of this game, and we drastically underutilized our abilities to battle him. As a result, we got clobbered. I think we made it through 6 of the maybe 15 rounds before we lost, because Biff just kept messing stuff up. So definitely we'll want to play again. Definitely falls into the category of harder cooperative game. But for all that, we really enjoyed it. In the game, you are moving around. You have tokens which give you actions to spend. It reminds me a little bit of the Hellboy game, actually, which has a similar mechanism. You can spend your tokens on other people's turns to help them do their tasks that they're trying to do. One of the things I'm not super keen on is that you are rolling dice to try to accomplish your tasks. And every die, 2 of the 6 sides are Biff faces. And every time you roll a Biff face, Biff activates. So if you just have some bad rolling, you could do really badly regardless of how well you prepared. And that's kind of what happened to us. Biff, one player kept rolling Biff over and over and over again. Like they'd roll 3 dice and get 3 Biff faces. And that was kind of dispiriting because it had nothing to do with our ability to play the game. And unlike Ghost Stories, where rolling the dice is a thing that doesn't help you most of the time and helps you occasionally, and the game is really hard, in Back to the Future, the game is moderately hard, except the dice could really hurt you, and they might not help you. So, on first comparison, not my favorite co-op game, but I really liked the theme and the theming. They used the comic book art, and the evolution of the game itself was pretty cool. Overall, I really enjoyed what the game was doing, and I'm looking forward to trying it again. I am sort of tempted to get Back to the Future Dice Through Time just so that I have all the Back to the Future games. But that's kind of silly because it did not get great reviews. But if I find it cheap somewhere, maybe I will, just as a completionist. So that gives you my first insights into 3 more games. And I'm now at the train, so I think I'm going to call it a day. Thank you for joining me on my walk today. What games have you been playing lately? Join the conversation over at the Pick Up and Deliver Guild. Guild number 3269 on Board Game Geek. You can also email me, Brendan at Rattlebox Games, or send me a direct message, Wombat929 at Board Game Geek. I also like to play asynchronous games, so my username is Wombat929 at Boitaju or Yukata.de or the very popular Board Game Arena, all 3 of which I would be happy to play a game with you asynchronously. My time for synchronous games is pretty limited, but asynchronous games, I've got plenty of time to check in and make a move once a day on a game with you. So, thanks for joining me today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.